Are you a woman standing at a crossroads, eager for change? It's time to connect with your authentic and empowered self at Boss Leap. Join Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker in this empowering community where real-life stories of courageous and talented women inspire and motivate. Engage in honest conversations that foster well-being, drawing from our own journeys. Let us guide you toward profound growth and transformation in both your personal and professional life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker.
So welcome to Boss Leap. I am Dr. Sylvia Morris.
And I am Dr. Angela Walker.
And today we are so excited and thrilled to have Alexis Walker as our guest today. So welcome, Lex, to Boss Leap.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So excited that you are here. And just a little bit of housekeeping. We want to make sure that we are completely transparent here at Boss Leap. So Lex, I believe that you are the favorite daughter present of our very own Dr. Angela Walker.
Correct.
And we just want to say hello to Chloe, who is Dr. Walker's other favorite daughter, who just happens not to be present.
That's right. I think that my favorite is the one that's sitting right in front of me because I love them both dearly. So thank you, Alexis. We appreciate you being here. And obviously, we are so excited to have you as a guest on the show because our show is truly about celebrating the lives and the stories of women that have made really boss leap moves in their career, their relationships, in life in general. And although you are one of our younger guests on this show, you certainly made some really courageous moves in life. And I think no matter what age you are listening to the podcast, we're able to learn from everybody and hopefully enhance our lives, gain courage, and make those changes that we have dreamed about, and perhaps get some power from those that are sharing their stories with us. So again, we thank you, Alexis, and hope this is a great conversation for you. We know it will be one for us.
Thank you. And thank you again for having me.
You are welcome. So we're just going to get right into it.
Perfect.
Talk about, you are the eldest daughter. So talk to us about what's being an eldest daughter, how that shaped you.
Definitely in a lot of ways, more ways than I can even count at this point. But I would say one of the main things has been in regards to patience. Being the oldest, you definitely have to learn your fair share of patience, whether that's in sharing everything, clothes, your room, your phone, everything, and sometimes without being asked. But that's obviously when we're much younger, and then from there, you kind of learn to adjust with your younger sibling, whether or not y'all see things the same way. And I feel like that's also carried over into the adult life and more so into my career life as well. So definitely helped shape some career challenges along the way as well. So
interesting, very interesting. So tell me, we moved from from Texas to Atlanta when you were in high school. Very interesting time of life.
Mhm.
And I know from experience that it was challenging, emotional, all of those things. I would just like for you to share what you think that experience taught you.
I think it taught me how to make adjustments along the way. Because when we were moving to Atlanta, for one, we were told we were moving to Atlanta. We did not necessarily move directly to Atlanta, which is the area that I was more familiar with. Our cousins lived in Atlanta, so we had visited a couple times, went to basketball games, made a couple friends with their friends. So I'm like, okay, I really don't want to leave Texas, but if we have to leave, at least I'm going to have these people over here that I get along with. No, we're like an hour north of Atlanta, and definitely a bit of a culture shock for us at the time, or me more specifically. I think my sister had a little bit of an easier time adjusting, but I specifically was halfway through high school, had played almost every sport at that point. And so I had grown up with all these people that I played sports with along the way, that I also have went to school with from elementary, intermediate, middle school, now to high school. And now I'm moving halfway through high school, and everybody's already made like their friends, specifically in high school, and already had somewhat of like selective teams. So it was very competitive there to kind of get a leg in, and definitely had to make some adjustments along the way in regards to like putting myself out there more, and talking to some people that I typically wouldn't talk to, being in some groups that I typically wouldn't be in, just to get a feel for things and try out what I liked and stuff. And from there, I was able to make a group of core friends in high school, that I think made the adjustment much easier. However, I will say that adjustment was definitely one for the books, in regards to everything from the moving experience and saying goodbye to all of those friends, and then getting here and having, I remember we had my 16th birthday here instead of in Texas, and then things like that. But even after that, I ended up staying for college. So I couldn't have not liked it that bad, but I did actually move to Atlanta that time. So it was a little nicer of an adjustment. Definitely felt like I made a great group of core friends that I will take with me along the way. And those people came from college. There's like 5 or 6 individuals that we're gonna be in each other's weddings and all of that kind of stuff. So definitely very appreciative of Atlanta specifically, because I would have never honestly ended up going to that college had I not moved to Georgia in the first place. It was very, very much of a one-off situation. I had my heart set on LSU, and I ended up going to a very small private liberal arts school in Brookhaven, Georgia. So that's kind of how it ended up. But learning how to adjust and be agile along the way was definitely the core lesson that I took away from that big adjustment in my life.
And kind of thinking back, what would you tell your younger self if you knew then what you know now?
I would tell myself there's always a bigger picture. But I also remember people saying some form of that along the way and not being able to actually comprehend that until getting much older. So I feel like it's one of those things. Some people get it at a much younger age, some people don't, but you have to kind of just live through things and figure out the beauty out of every lesson, so to say. And I feel like I've finally come to comprehend that now at a much younger age. It was not there. I wasn't comprehending why I had to come to Georgia. I tried in my very best interest to stay with either my grandma, my cousins. I was begging everybody if I could just live there. I told my mom I'd come visit on the weekends and everything. So I remember it being such a painful time, but I learned a lot of things from that. So all worked out for the best.
Awesome. So I guess I'll have a follow-up question to that. Knowing what you know now at age 25, can you, and because I know there are going to be a lot of women my age or mothers and even younger mothers listening, you may not have the, reflective knowledge right now, but can you give advice to a parent at, that's trying to support a child that's going through those changes? I can say that, I certainly thought it was the right thing. But I can also say that, parenting is, there's no playbook for each child, and you kind of learn along the way, and I'm always trying to do my very best, but I know the best is not always the right thing, or what I think is the best is not always the right thing. So again, you may not have the knowledge right now, but if you do, any advice to somebody in supporting, a teenager that's going through a difficult transition?
I don't know. I might not have the knowledge to answer that question, honestly.
Fair.
But, and this isn't in regards to you, because I think for my sister and I, we both managed to find sport teams that we kind of ended up adapting to. However, I would say for me, my easiest thing would be finding like-minded either activities or things that I could kind of transfer over into that were a little easier to transfer over to. However, transferring from Texas over to Georgia, we learned like the curriculum, or wow, that is a very difficult word to say right now. Curriculum is very much more challenging in Georgia than it was in Texas. And that was something that was quite a hassle for me. I was never used to getting poor grades at the time. And then all of a sudden it was just, I wasn't understanding how to do things because they were much further in their curriculum at the time. So that was definitely a big challenge, finding ways that were interactive for me. Something that was a little bit more tangible that made it feel worth it, because at the time I also didn't want to be there. So it's like, I didn't want to be there. And then on top of that, it's much more challenging and it's just like, why am I here? So it was kind of all of those things, but I don't know that I necessarily have like a much larger lesson. Those are just things that I'm kind of thinking back on that may have been easier. I don't know. But I think it's one of those things that you just had to learn along the way. And because I feel like I learned that at a younger age, it helped me maneuver different situations. Even in like my earlier 20s, I would say that that would have been a little bit more challenging to someone that hadn't gone through that, or even just wanting to get a job at a much younger age. So I had something else that I could do, and that helped me adapt to different environments as well, talking to different people, getting put in different positions. So that kind of, it essentially was a blessing in disguise. I ended up working there for like 7 years. And from there, what took so much transferable knowledge over to different areas in my life and different business things. So I think that it all kind of summed up to a much larger blessing. But yeah, and now I'm back in Dallas. So all my friends that I kind of grew up with in high school, I've still kind of connected to them and watching them go through life and everything. So kind of cool to come full circle.
We certainly appreciate you being candid about that. That I can only imagine was a tough period. Transitions are not fun at any age, and trying to find the silver lining is not always easy. So I definitely applaud that. And you've lived internationally. Can you kind of talk about what led you to moving outside of the States and what you learned from that journey?
Yes. So from an early age, I've always had a passion for traveling. I love specifically the beach, but just
Me
different
too.
environments. Exactly. I wish I was at the beach right now, but just different environments. I love experiencing different cultures, learning about different things. I don't know, meeting different people, different languages. But I really like being immersed in different cultures, not just the touristy things, but actually meeting people that aren't necessarily in the tourist cities and stuff like that. And having the locals show me around to the different places. So I guess this was probably in like 2021, 2022, no, 2022.
22.
I had been traveling quite a bit to Tulum in Mexico. And this is prior, when I was traveling quite a bit, it was prior to it becoming the now tourist spot that it is. It's kind of turning into the #2 Cancun at this point, but still a very, very beautiful place to go. But at the time I was traveling quite a bit over there and had always desired to actually go longer term outside of the country, or see how that would look at least. And at the time I was working in the States, so it wasn't necessarily an opportunity that I could take at the moment. So I was looking to just save up my money. And then when the opportunity came up, I was gonna go for it, as long as everything aligned. And it just so happened that at the time, that was kind of when COVID started declining. So my job was more so dependent at the time, my job was more so dependent on the COVID pandemic and helping during that time. So they ended up transferring me to a different department, which would have required me to relocate. And I was not ready for that yet. So Instead, I saw that as a better opportunity to try and find something more remote that would give me time to do the travel that I've always wanted to do. I just never necessarily been in the position to do so, but I did know that I didn't want to pack all my things up and move to a different state. So I ended up leaving that job, and instead I moved to Mexico for about 3 months. It was about 2.5 months. And in that time I lived at 3 different, so what we did is during the traveling time, I actually met with a couple realtors. So we got like an actual apartment, and rented an apartment for a month at a time. So I went through 3 different apartments and just kind of got to check out different areas. And from there I would travel from Tulum to different cities or different areas in the country, which was really cool. It was a very cool experience. I learned a lot of Spanish at the time. I haven't been practicing it as much as of late. So I definitely need another Mexico trip very, very soon so I can get to practicing again. But definitely a very unique point in my life. And I feel like I learned a lot out of it. I made a lot of cool friends, contacts that I have to this day, even just people that had moved to Mexico from different countries. I had a couple friends that were from the UK, that ended up getting married, and I've just been following them on Instagram. We talk to each other every now and then, and every time we end up being there, we connect. So it's just cool to have met different people that are kind of all on different walks of life. And then after Mexico, I think I came back because I ended up getting a remote job. So that's why I ended up leaving Mexico early, to come back to the States and get ready from that. And then from there, I went to Guatemala for about a month. Amazing. It was absolutely breathtaking. And in Guatemala, granted, in Tulum, I had a beach, which I'm used to the beach. I love the beach. In Guatemala, I did not. So there was a lake. It's called Lake Atilan. That we went to the second portion of the trip. So the last 2 weeks of the trip, we went to the lake and got to experience life over there. So there's actually like different cities along the lake, and beautiful lake. I don't know, it's just a breathtaking place. If anybody's never been, you've got to go, because I honestly can't even put it in words. But we literally got to hike up volcanic ash and watch. If you took a different hike, which we didn't take this hike was like, I think it was like a 12-hour hike. And at the time I was not.
Did you say 12 hours?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No more than about 2. It needs to be flat, maybe like a road. There needs to be beverages. Okay.
Yeah, no. They had a horse. You could rent like a donkey or a horse to ride up, but like then you kind of look like a wimp because everybody else is walking, and I was like, I can't be the only person getting on this horse right now going up the hill. So I decided to take the shorter one, which was also very beautiful. They had like a restaurant halfway up, and so you could literally see all of the volcanoes and everything. It was something I've never seen before personally. I've seen the beach multiple times, and granted, beaches in Mexico are beautiful, but I've never been able to say that I've hiked up volcanic ash or seen an actual what is it called? An actual volcano at the time. So I didn't get to see it erupt, but I got to see videos from
Thankfully,
exactly.
eruptions are bad. Okay.
Some of my friends went up the longer hike, so you actually get to sit on top of an inactive volcano and you sleep there overnight. And then at about 3 in the morning, you can see across the way the active volcano erupting. So it's very far. It's not like you're gonna feel it by any means, but it's amazing to watch. So that's definitely up on my list to go back to as soon as I get the chance.
I have to say that I feel like your travel bug came from me. Not that we went to many exotic places, but certainly your love of the beach.
Yes.
Just want to, and I'm obviously in awe of you and all that you do. And not just because you're my daughter, but that you think that, but not just because you're my daughter. But I think the moxie that it takes to say, I want to do this and I'm going to do this is remarkable. And there are women, actually friends my age, that are just now getting the courage to travel abroad. And one friend in particular who's now an expat in Mexico. But I think it's more prevalent now than certainly when I was young, for sure. We all had kind of like that traditional, people that I know had that kind of traditional path, and certainly taking 3 months away from anything was not something that you did or even dreamed about. But can you talk just a little bit for those, again, that may be considering traveling abroad? I don't need you to go in depth, but what that took, because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to book a trip to Tulum for 3 months and then get on the plane and go. There's a little bit of preparation beforehand. And just maybe a little bit, because I do have knowledge of how you traveled in Guatemala, which I can never fathom, but you did a little stay at the, what do you call it?
Hostel?
Hostel, yeah. So just if you can just briefly, I mean, I don't want you to go in depth, but just briefly tell us a little bit about the preparation, and then your like kind of the differences in the travel arrangements that you had when you were in both locations.
Absolutely. So I will say at the time, I was doing a lot of research on Instagram, on a lot of different social media websites, because I feel like that's where I was getting that's where I was researching a lot of the remote jobs at the time as well. That's what I needed to financially be able to travel. So when I went to Guatemala, I had come back to the States, gotten a remote job. So when I was in Guatemala, every day I was still working my remote job. So the
How did
hostel.
you make sure that you were going to have like internet access and the appropriate internet access?
So I actually researched, the hostel that we stayed at is from people that had actually stayed at multiple hostels. They kept telling us this is like the luxury hostel. This one's almost like a hotel, which if that's the case, that's fine. It was amazing to me. It was gorgeous. They literally had like a hanging daybed that overlooked the volcanoes and everything. Like it was an amazing place, but it was actually geared more towards digital nomads or people that needed a co-working environment. So they had you obviously rented like your hostel room, and then which depended on how many people you wanted in a room. At the time, I think we did 2 separate rooms. There was one that was 4 people, and then there was one where there was 8 beds, but only like 3 people were in there at a time. It was never fully packed out. So it kind of just depended on how comfortable you were. Granted, at the time we had became very comfortable with everybody that worked there, and a lot of the people that were staying there. But I also wasn't traveling by myself. I wouldn't have done that if I was traveling by myself. And at the time, so like I said, they had the co-working environment as well. So that was a separate fee that you had to pay. It was like a daily fee of I think $7. And then you get the co-working space, you get the Wi-Fi all day. They have like specific quiet areas. And prior to me going, I researched obviously the hostel to make sure it was the best environment for that and that I would be set up on my work spaces and everything. But I also made sure to sign up for like a VPN that would allow all my information to be processed through the US. So that way it would still be like my computer was still in the US. And I'm not the most technical person, so I can't really speak as much on that, but I did do a lot of research into that prior. So I made sure it would work. I tested it on different VPNs and everything. And I actually had a layover, I believe in Mexico maybe before going to Guatemala. So I tested it like during my layover as well, just to make sure everything was working. So I felt very comfortable with that. And I somewhat introduced the fact that I would be traveling. I didn't necessarily say where I was traveling to, just to make sure it was working first. And then everything was fine. I was on my meetings every day. The Wi-Fi was never shaky. There was days where it was raining really bad and it was still fine because it was specific to co-working spaces. So that's kind of how that went about. It was still cool because I would still get off at a decent time. I think I was getting off around 4 every day, or 4 p.m. Guatemalan time. So where I was, at least. So it wasn't terrible. I still had enough time to go and explore the day. And then obviously on the weekends, I had the entire weekends to do whatever I wanted to do. So that's when I would do like the hikes and the longer activities and everything. And then as for Mexico, like I said, when we were doing a lot of traveling, we honestly kind of just started like calling the sign, like the realtor signs, or like texting them on WhatsApp. And then additionally, a really good move is actually an Airbnb. Would hate to hear me say this, but if you get on Airbnb, a lot of the times, which they're not supposed to, a lot of the times you can get these people off of Airbnb to get you a lower rate if you're doing a longer stay. And a lot of them will offer that up front. So if you get on Airbnb and you say that you need it for a month, which is around what we were looking at the time, I think it was like 3.5 weeks to a month is where we would stay in one apartment, and it's literally an entire apartment. For what I'm paying right now, about a third of the price, and that was between 2 people. And I'm talking about like a luxury apartment. You had the little, what is it called? It's not called a dip pool, but it's plunge pool. You would have like a plunge pool in like your little backyard. Yeah, it was luxury to say the least. And I mean, it was obviously, it's a different country, and the prices are different. It also depended on what location you were in. Like I said, I never loved to stay in the touristy area, so I would stay a lot more detached from that. I would stay closer to like the locals area. And when we were traveling, we would ask a lot of the locals that we became friends with, different questions about different areas or like different properties. Became friends with a couple of realtors that we were going back and forth with on WhatsApp. So we were actually calling around and researching some of these places while we were traveling. So we got to see some of them up front, and then made the decision while we were here, obviously, to then go to those. But I will say we did it oddly, because we paid 1 month up front for the first place, and we were planning on kind of just staying there the whole time. And then we started seeing so many different areas, and we were like, you know what, let's just try a different place. So then we went to another one, and it was very easy to get the rent done and get that all signed. I think we had the same leasing agent the entire time as well, and she was amazing. And had great connections and was able to get everything done professionally and had no issues with any of that. So definitely not necessarily like the easiest process in regards to it being something like you just have to look it up online and you can submit your application and just come tour, and now you get your key. But it's not necessarily hard as long as you actually have the desire to go. And at the time, I had a burning desire to actually move to Mexico, and I wanted to do it longer. It just didn't work out that time, but hopefully in the near future I can do that, or move to a different country for somewhat of an extended period of time. So that's kind of how I did it. Definitely a lot of research and preparation that went into it. I would recommend looking at podcasts and actually following different people that have done it, not necessarily just Googling how to do it, because anybody can realistically tell you like the fundamentals, A, B, C, D, E, how to do it. But if you actually go through someone, not necessarily go through someone, you always want to take bits and pieces of everybody's advice and follow what works best for you. But I think that there's a lot of value in asking how people went about doing it, because you always find different recommendations. Like for me, if you're traveling out of Dallas, my one tidbit is there's a website called Cheap DFW, and it literally is like a application online that scans the cheapest flights to different places. So sometimes I just get on there and I'm like, oh, there's a $38 flight to San Diego. So I went to go visit my sister in San Diego for $37 on Delta, just because I found it on there. And that's actually how I found my tickets to Mexico, as well as how I found my tickets to Guatemala. So it was significantly cheaper than going about it the way that I would have or known best how to. So I found that through other people. And I think that there was a lot of different things that I that helped me along the way and helped save me money and made it best for me. So
Thank
So
you.
I'm hearing there's a lot of planning and networking and really kind of connecting to what you're hearing, but what works for me is what I'm hearing from your kind of your world adventures. What I'd like to also know is you've been moving from one opportunity, whether it's being a nomad worker or working remote and or working remotely to working in Dallas and all of these transitions. So how do you identify when it's good to make a leap?
I actually read something this morning. I literally read it on Instagram this morning and saved it. You shouldn't feel guilty in leaving when you realize it's not what's best for you anymore. It says something along the lines of that. It was definitely a lot more powerful than the words I just said, but it said something along the lines of that, and it really resonated with me because I think that's how I've at least translated it in regards to when it feels right for me to leave. At least I would say in the last few years, as I've been a lot more knowledgeable, I guess, career-wise. Prior to that, I had worked at Lifetime for like 7 years and had no intention on leaving, but I was moving at the time. And then I was in different positions, and at the time, like when I got to college, I was undecided, and then I was a business major. So it was kind of a transition period where I didn't necessarily know what was best. And as I started to feel drained in working, because I've always enjoyed working, and I feel like as long as I'm passionate about it, it doesn't really feel like work for me. I will literally, I used to live at Lifetime and I loved it. I loved every
Can I
bit of it.
interrupt you for a moment? The
Yes.
one thing that I really admire about you, lots of things, but one thing in particular, your drive. You are always working on sort of an opportunity. You are always working as far as, how do I make my dreams come true? And work ethic is really what I'm trying to say is really important. And it's such an admirable quality that you have. So that's going to take you far, but I'll let you continue.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's definitely been, I don't know, I had to kind of also teach myself a lesson along the way, because I feel like both of my parents have their jobs are much more of traditional jobs, and I don't know, I thought I wanted to go more of the traditional route, and then I realized I don't know, the creativity in me had different desires. And I ended up managing restaurants that I never thought I was going to end up managing. I never thought I was going to get up into that industry. And that led me more towards events and actually putting together events and putting together bits and pieces, which is something I've always loved to do and something that I've done in my past job at Lifetime that I truly, truly loved, where it didn't feel like work. So that's something that I'm aiming to get back towards. And I had to essentially teach myself the lesson and also explain to my parents that it was okay for me to go more of the non-traditional route because of the light that I essentially saw at the end of the tunnel. And I knew that trusting in the fact that I could go an opposite route would still get me to the end goal that I want. And knowing that just because we have different, I guess, views of that, there was still somewhat of that end goal. So that was something that I had to learn along the way as well.
Interesting that you say that, because obviously I'm part of the parent part that you talked about. I'll just echo what Sylvia said is that your work ethic. I mean, as your dad would say, there's nobody that's going to outwork Alexis, and particularly when you're passionate. And so there's nothing greater, I think, as a parent than when your child can find happiness, joy, and passion in what they're doing, not only for themselves, but for others. And so I've always seen the artistic side in you, and I have always had that passion that you find something that gives you joy in life, not just security. And I think we grew up in a generation, we meaning Sylvia and I, and in a generation where you secured a job that provided, solid benefits, security, and we didn't have the transitions that we have now. And, that's one of the purposes of the show is that, Boss Leap, just showing how people are making, changes. But along those lines, you're in your 20s and we're not. Um, what do you think you could impart in terms of wisdom to, women that are trying to support their younger sisters in making, ways or supporting them just in general in their careers, their relationships, anything that you'd want to share?
I would say be open to different views, like I was kind of going back to, or not even necessarily different view. Well, yes, different views, but also be open to just different, I don't know, ideas or different ways to go about the same end goal, so to say, that happiness and that, essentially it kind of sums up to security, because it's all the security that you want. Like, I want the happiness in a job. Obviously, you want to be able to financially support yourself as well. You want the work-life balance. All of those different aspects add up to the security that you get out of that job, so to say. At least that's how I look at it personally. So I would say being open to the different way that it may take to get there, but also being open to share stories along the way as requested. Because I will say sometimes people overshare and it's not necessarily the time where someone needs to hear it. And granted, sometimes like it goes both ways. It definitely goes both ways. However, I will say along the way, there was definitely a lot of times, and not necessarily my mom, but just different times that other people would offer me advice where I wasn't looking for advice. I've already made the decision that I wanted to go this way for myself. And for me, it was already a challenging decision to kind of, so to say, tell essentially my dad, tell my dad, like, hey, I don't want this traditional role where it gives me all this security. And I know I have X, Y, and Z, which is something I've always been working towards. I always wanted to do the corporate life. I always wanted to work corporate and everything. And then it switched because I realized that I could reach the same goal doing different things that I enjoyed a lot more than what I was doing at the time. And if I'm happy and I'm financially stable and I have the freedom to do what I'm actually truly passionate doing, which is like traveling and exploring different cultures and seeing the world and all of those different things, then I think that I've kind of already checked that box. So I would say, though, being open to share stories along the way, because there's definitely a lot of knowledge that I've also learned along the way after hearing different stories about different people that have done either a job that I want to incorporate into what I'm going to do, or something that was just transferable that I've used along the way, even so far. So being open to sharing, but also just being cautious that you're not necessarily crushing someone's dreams, but so to say, crushing someone's dreams at such an early and I feel like vulnerable stage of trying to figure out what that dream even is. Because at the time, like, I knew this isn't what I wanted, but it's not like I still haven't fully figured out exactly what I want in my future. So it's like it's a very vulnerable stage, I feel like, at the same time. So it's just like being cautious along the way.
I think part of what happens is that inner instinct to protect. And what we want to do is to, did you think about this? And do you know about that? And are you sure? And you do that. And you're right, that kind of stamps on people's happiness. And I don't want people to be led by fear. And I'm hopeful that at this point in my life, I'm doing a much better job of listening and being open to different ways of doing things, because I think the beautiful thing about where we are at this point in 2024, there's so many more options than we had when we were coming out of high school. And just being able to kind of dream big and to make those boss leaps really requires Moxy, like your mom was talking about, and also sort of that vision to say, you know, hey, I don't have all the answers right now, but this is my plan on how I intend to be successful. But then I can always pivot as well, because I'm hearing that there were opportunities, and then you made a different decision kind of once you got there because you had more information that you could then parlay into the next opportunity. So thank you. You're exactly right about that. I'm going to try not to crush anyone else's dreams.
Crush is probably a harsher word than I was going for.
Very good. Very good. Okay. On to one of my favorite questions is, can you tell us a little bit about your self-care regimen? And I'm hoping that it's going to be full of wonderful things, but let's say if it's not, what are your plans? So tell us what you're currently doing, and if you have plans to either beef that up or change, or just recommendations in general.
I'd say right now my main focus, and I feel like this is for all aspects, but definitely self-care falls under it as well, is to get somewhat better on a routine or a schedule. So I'm doing some of the self-care things on more of a regulated basis compared to just doing them when I have a chance or doing them if I have time. Because I think just building them into your schedule helps make everything just a little easier along the way as well, instead of just building it in when you have time, because essentially you're going to keep filling the time with things you need to do. But I think that self-care definitely falls under one of those things that you need to do. I'd say for the time being, one of the things is lashes, which I currently don't have any on. So this is not a great time to talk about that, but I'd say getting my lashes done is definitely one of my biggest self-care things. I love having my lashes done. I feel like my lashes and my hair done, I don't need my makeup bag, I'm fine. And I will go about any day and I'll be fine. But I love having my lashes done, my hair done. I think that those are my top two. If those are done, I don't necessarily need my nails done, but I do enjoy getting my nails done as well. I'd say those are probably my top three things in regards to self-care. And then I used to, like I mentioned, I used to work at Lifetime Fitness, and I know I bring that up a lot, but it played a large part in my life. And at the time I got very big into the gym. So I will say the gym is definitely falls under that self-care routine as well. For the last like week and a half though, I've been slacking, so I need to get back into it. But I am trying to get back in a routine of that as well, and working that into my daily schedule now that I have a little bit more free time. So definitely focusing on those things. And then I do enjoy going to Pilates as well, or some sort of yoga or meditation would be nice to incorporate. I'm doing Pilates. I'm aiming for around 3 times a week to incorporate in there as well. So trying to just stay as regulated on those things as possible, and really beat them into my schedule, so that way it's not as one-off. And I know that I've had this imprinted in my brain for probably the last, I don't even know how many years, but after, I think it's 21 days built a habit, or 21 days built a, 21 days built a habit. So that's what I'm aiming for. So that way we can get these habits back on track. But I'd say that for the most part sums up my self-care regimen. I would love to incorporate like facials, maybe some massages in the future, but we'll get there eventually.
Love that. And you've never been a patient of mine, but that's exactly the recommendation that I give patients, is that if you want to get it done in terms of exercise, self-care, you have to write it down. You have to make that a part of your schedule, and you tell others in your life that this is what I'm doing at this time, so that it's a known fact that, okay, she's not available right now. And so you're not even asked to compromise your schedule for those things. I will say I heard somebody recently talk about the nails and lashes and things that we do should be considered maintenance, not self-care, like things that we need to do. And so really self-care as the things that you mentioned, like Pilates, the massages, the facials, and you work hard, you should be able to do those things for yourself and not feel guilt. And so so happy that you had the answer that you did, and that you have the plans that you do, because I think ultimately for us as busy women, it's just important to do those things just for our mental health. And so great answer.
Intentionality is really important. And one of our classmates, I text her every day that I've walked. So I send her my walk path, and it helps her to walk. It also helps me to walk, because what happens is if I haven't done it in like 3 or 4 days, I'll get a text from her saying, "Hey girl, have you walked today?" I'm like, oh. So it's an accountability partner, and that is helpful to kind of keep me doing the things for myself that I say that I want to do for myself. So
Yes.
Kudos.
That is definitely what I'm also aiming to try and find here, specifically for the gym. I had one of my good core friends from college used to be my accountability buddy for the gym, and we went every day at a designated time, and we never missed a workout. Like if you're not here, I'm coming to your apartment and we're gonna run outside. So I definitely need to find another one of those, because I think that definitely helped along the way, to your point as well.
Really. So as we kind of come to the end of our conversation, what are you most excited for the future?
This is kind of a one-off answer, but figuring out what it is, honestly, waiting for what the bigger picture is to come. I know that there's definitely some larger things to come, just based off of everything that I've been doing so far, I guess, career-wise and life-wise, and where I want to go and what I've been manifesting for myself. So just not necessarily waiting to find out, because I know life happens when it needs to, but kind of just excited for what's to come. But I'm also excited I want to eventually build my own business. So figuring out what that looks like and learning the process along the way, and then having that come to fruition, I'm definitely excited about, and excited to get started. So
we cannot wait to have you back after you have started that. So we can learn more about your Boss Leap moves. And so grateful for you being with us, and being part of a Boss Leap for us, and trying to share stories of women that aren't necessarily heard on a regular basis, or their stories have not been heard, but we know have such inspiring stories to tell. So we can't thank you enough, Lex.
of
So
course.
thank you very much, Alexis Walker, for sharing your journey. My take homes, certainly planning is important, definitely networking, looking for that silver lining, and waiting for things to align. And I want to applaud your Moxy and your work ethic, and also your self-care regime. So we look forward to talking with you again in the future as your life continues to evolve in wonderful, wonderful ways. And we want to thank our audience, our listeners, for listening to Boss Leap. And we invite you to check out our website, bossleappodcast.com, and leave any comments on the show or what you'd like to see next.
And until then, we wish that you are well, in happiness and joy.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on another episode of Boss Leap. May this conversation enlighten your path toward personal growth and professional empowerment. For more thought-provoking and eye-opening discussions like this one, head to our website at bossleappodcast.com. Always remember to celebrate your wins and trust yourself. A positive mindset can push you out of your comfort zone and into far greater heights. Until next time, may you be well.
Before we go, there's one more thing the lawyers have asked us to include. It's the legal language. And you know how doctors love lawyers. This podcast is presented only for educational and entertainment purposes. Although we are doctors, on this show, we are just your friends. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals. Understood? Awesome. We'll see you in the next episode.